2:47 a.m. She stares at her phone, his last message from 6 hours ago. A simple good night that somehow felt colder and more distant than it should have. 43 times, she's read it, dissecting every letter and punctuation mark, searching for some hidden meaning in just 2 words. Her stomach churns, her heart races, and her mind spirals through 1,000 different scenarios. Is he losing interest? Is he seeing someone else? Did she say or do something wrong? This isn't love. It's an addiction she isn't even aware is happening. Welcome to the hidden psychology of female attraction, a neurochemical cocktail that turns a rational woman into an obsessed creature. The evolutionary programming that makes her desire what she can't have, and the psychological patterns that make an ordinary man her own personal drug. Understanding these concepts isn't about manipulation, but rather about comprehension, because when you understand the science behind her longing, you'll understand something profound about human nature itself. 1. The neurochemical addiction. How her brain becomes hooked. Her attraction to you isn't emotional. It's chemical, and chemicals are addictive. Let's start with the science. When a woman is attracted to a man, her brain doesn't just think differently, it literally changes. The same neurochemical pathways that are activated during cocaine addiction light up when she is infatuated with you. Dopamine, the wanting chemical, not the happiness chemical, floods her system. This is what makes her check her phone obsessively, analyze every word you say, and create elaborate fantasies about your future together. Dopamine doesn't say I'm satisfied, it says I need more. But here is where things get interesting. Dopamine isn't released when she gets what she wants. It's released when she anticipates getting what she wants. The moment just before she receives a text, the seconds before you walk through the door, the uncertainty before you make a move. This is precisely why a woman with your complete attention often loses interest, while the woman who can't quite figure you out becomes obsessed. Her brain is literally engineered to crave the uncertain, the unpredictable, the almost but not quite. Add norepinephrine to the mix. It's the stress hormone that makes her heart race when she sees you, her hands shake when you touch her, and makes her unable to eat or sleep when you're on her mind. This isn't comfort, this is chemical intoxication. Then comes phenethylamine, the natural amphetamine that creates the butterflies in her stomach, and that giddy feeling when you're around, that sense that everything is more vivid, intense, and real when she is in your presence. Finally, oxytocin bonds her to you, released during physical touch, intimate moments, and deep conversation. It is the chemical that makes her feel safe and connected to you. But oxytocin has a dark side. It makes her more susceptible to manipulation, more likely to overlook red flags, and more willing to sacrifice her own needs for the relationship. Together, these chemicals create a perfect storm of addiction. She's not choosing to obsess over you. Her brain is compelling her to. She's not deciding to lose herself in the relationship. Her neurochemistry is hijacking her rational mind. This is why she can't just get over you, why she checks your social media at 3 a.m., and why she analyzes every interaction for a hidden meaning. She's not crazy. She's human, and human brains are wired for addiction. But here's the crucial part. This chemical cocktail isn't triggered by kindness, devotion, or availability. It is triggered by uncertainty, challenge, and intermittent reinforcement. The man who is always there, always available, and always reassuring rarely triggers this neurochemical response. The man who is sometimes there, sometimes distant, sometimes warm, and sometimes cold is the one who activates her addiction circuits. Understanding this doesn't mean you should be cruel or manipulative. It means recognizing that attraction operates on a different frequency than logic, that her heart doesn't want what her head thinks it should want, and that the behaviors that make logical sense often kill the very attraction you're trying to maintain. The question isn't whether this system is fair or rational. The question is whether you understand it well enough to work with it instead of against it. 2. The evolutionary program why she craves what she can't control, her desire for the unattainable is not a bug in her programming. It's a feature. Evolution doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about survival and reproduction. For thousands of years, the women who survived and passed on their genes were attracted to men who displayed specific traits that often had nothing to do with kindness or availability. Resources, status, strength, protection, and genetic quality were the characteristics that meant survival for her and her offspring. But how does a woman's brain quickly assess these qualities in a potential mate? Through behavioral cues, social dynamics, the way other people respond to him, his ability to remain calm under pressure, his willingness to walk away if not treated with respect, and his capacity to make decisions without her approval. These cues trigger what psychologists call preselection bias, the tendency to want what others want, to desire what seems scarce, and to be attracted to what appears valuable. This isn't shallow or materialistic. This is survival programming that's been refined over millennia. This is why the man who is surrounded by other women often becomes more attractive to her. This is why the man who has options seems more desirable than the man who doesn't. This is why the man who's willing to lose her often gains her respect in ways that a man who clings never will. Her brain is constantly running calculations. Is this man high value or low value? Is he chosen by others or ignored? Does he have options, or is she his only one? Is he moving toward his goals, or is he waiting for her approval to live his life? The answers to these questions determine not just her level of attraction, but her level of investment. A woman who perceives you as high value will invest more emotion, more energy, and more of herself in keeping and winning your attention. A woman who perceives you as low value will invest less, withdraw more, and eventually lose interest entirely. This isn't a conscious process. She's not sitting there analyzing your market value like a stock trader. This evaluation happens at a subconscious level, processed by brain regions that evolved long before logic, language, or conscious reasoning. This is why her attraction to you can change so dramatically based on external factors. A promotion at work, the way your friends treat you, your confidence in social situations, and your reaction to her challenges and tests all feed into her subconscious evaluation of your value. But here is what most men miss. Her desire for the unattainable isn't just about assessing your value. It's about maximizing her own genetic investment. If she can win the attention of a high-value man who has options, her offspring will inherit those same high-value traits. If she settles for a man who has no options, she's potentially limiting her genetic legacy. This programming runs so deep that it often overrides her conscious preferences. She might logically know that the available, devoted man is better for her long-term happiness, but her attraction circuits are pulling her toward the unpredictable, challenging man who triggers her evolutionary algorithms. Understanding this isn't about becoming manipulative or playing games. It's about recognizing that attraction operates according to ancient rules that have nothing to do with modern dating advice. The man who tries to win her through devotion and availability is fighting against millions of years of evolutionary programming. The man who maintains his independence, his standards, and his options is working with that programming instead of against it. 3. The psychology of intermittent reinforcement. Why inconsistency creates obsession. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time, and that's precisely why people can't stop pulling the lever. The most powerful tool for creating psychological addiction isn't constant reward, it's intermittent reinforcement. Irregular, unpredictable, sometimes yes, sometimes no, patterns of behavior create the strongest psychological bonds known to science. This principle was discovered by B.F. Skinner in his experiments with pigeons and slot machines. When rewards are given consistently, behavior becomes predictable and eventually boring. When rewards are given randomly, behavior becomes compulsive and obsessive. Apply this to human relationships. and you'll unlock the secret to why she becomes addicted to certain men while losing interest in others. The man who always texts back immediately, always says yes to her requests, always makes himself available, and always shows affection is providing consistent reinforcement. Her brain quickly learns the pattern. He's predictable, reliable, and always there. While this might seem positive, it actually reduces dopamine production. Her brain stops anticipating because it knows what to expect. The man who sometimes texts back immediately, and sometimes doesn't, who sometimes says yes, and sometimes has other plans, who sometimes seems distant, and sometimes shows intense affection, he is providing intermittent reinforcement. Her brain can't predict the pattern, so it remains in a constant state of anticipation, flooding her system with dopamine every time. He does respond positively. This is why she obsessively checks his social media, but barely glances at the social media of men who are always available to her. This is why she analyzes every word from the man who is sometimes warm and sometimes cold, while taking for granted the words of the man who is consistently affectionate. Her brain interprets inconsistency as value. The reasoning is unconscious but simple. If he were low value, he would always be available, always eager to please, and always seeking her approval. The fact that he's sometimes unavailable, unresponsive, and focused on other priorities suggests that he has a life worth living, options and resources independent of her validation. But intermittent reinforcement goes deeper than just texting, patterns, or availability. It shows up in emotional intimacy, physical affection, attention, and validation. The man who shares deeply sometimes and remains mysterious at other times creates more intrigue than the man who is an open book. The man who is physically affectionate in private but maintains some distance in public creates more tension than the man who is constantly touching her. This principle explains why the bad boy archetype is so universally attractive across generations and cultures. It's not that women are attracted to men who treat them poorly. They are attracted to men who provide intermittent reinforcement, moments of incredible connection, followed by periods of distance, times of intense attention, followed by times of distraction, and experiences of feeling special, followed by experiences of uncertainty. The key insight is this: her addiction isn't to the negative treatment. It's to the unpredictability. It's to the high highs that feel even higher because of the lower lows. It's to the dopamine rush that comes from not knowing what to expect next. This is why relationships often lose their spark over time. As couples become more predictable to each other, the intermittent reinforcement naturally decreases. The mystery fades, the uncertainty disappears, and the brain stops producing the neurochemicals that created the initial obsession and attraction. Understanding this pattern allows you to maintain attraction not through manipulation or cruelty, but through maintaining your own autonomy, unpredictability, and independence within the relationship. The man who continues to have his own interests, his own goals, his own social circle, and his own challenges naturally provides intermittent reinforcement because he's not always available, not always predictable, and not always focused on her. The woman who experiences this doesn't feel undervalued or neglected. She feels challenged, intrigued, and constantly reattracted to a man who remains somewhat of a mystery, even as the relationship deepens. 4. The validation trap. How her self-worth becomes tied to your attention. She didn't fall in love with you. She fell in love with the person she became when she was with you. This is where the psychology becomes particularly complex and potentially destructive. When a woman becomes addicted to a man, she's often not addicted to him as a person. She's addicted to the version of herself that exists in his presence. This happens through a process psychologists call reflected appraisal. The tendency to see ourselves through the eyes of others, especially those we perceive as significant or high value. When you're paying attention to her, when she's with you, and when you're choosing her over other options, she feels desirable, valuable, and worthy of love. But here's the trap. If her sense of self-worth becomes dependent on your approval and attention, your withdrawal of that attention doesn't just disappoint her. It threatens her entire sense of identity. She doesn't just miss you, she misses who she was when she was with you. This creates a psychological dependency that goes far beyond normal attraction or even love. She needs your attention to feel valuable, your validation to feel good about herself, and your approval to feel worthy. Without these things, she doesn't just feel sad. She feels confused, lost, and empty. This is why some women become completely consumed by relationships, while others maintain their independence. It's not about emotional maturity or personality type. It's about where they source their self. The woman who derives her value from her own accomplishments, relationships with family and friends, individual goals, and personal growth will be attracted to you, but not addicted to you. The woman who derives her value primarily from romantic relationships will become psychologically dependent on your validation. The dangerous part is that this dependency can masquerade as deep love or intense attraction. She seems utterly committed, completely devoted, and willing to sacrifice anything for the relationship. But underneath, she's not loving you. She's clinging to you, because without you, she loses her sense of self. This explains why some women become more obsessed when they're treated poorly, and more distant when they're treated well. Poor treatment threatens their self-worth, creating desperation and anxiety to regain your approval. Good treatment feels nice, but doesn't create the same psychological dependency because it doesn't involve the threat of losing their sense of value. Men often mistake this dependency for genuine love or attraction. They think the woman who can't live without them, who organizes her entire life around them, and who seems lost without their attention, loves them more than the woman who maintains her independence. But dependency isn't love, it's addiction. The woman who is addicted to your validation will do almost anything to maintain it. She abandon her own interests, neglect her own goals, compromise her own values, and sacrifice her own relationships. She'll tolerate behavior she wouldn't normally accept, overlook red flags she would normally notice, and stay in situations she would normally leave. This might seem advantageous from a male perspective, having a woman who is completely devoted and willing to do anything to keep you. But this kind of relationship is ultimately unfulfilling and unsustainable for both parties. She becomes increasingly clingy and desperate, and you become increasingly burdened by her lack of independence and neediness. The healthiest relationships involve two people who are complete and whole on their own, choosing to share their lives together rather than using each other to fill internal voids. The woman who is attracted to you but not addicted to your validation is the woman who will maintain her independence, her attractiveness, and her ability to contribute to the relationship rather than just consume from it. Understanding this distinction is crucial for any man who wants to build something meaningful with a woman, rather than just experience the short-term high of being desperately needed by someone whose self-worth depends on his approval. 5. How emotional investment creates a psychological hierarchy in every relationship. There's a pursued and a pursuer. The one who cares less has all the power. The final piece of the puzzle is perhaps the most politically incorrect, but psychologically accurate. Relationships are power dynamics, and emotional investment is the currency of that power. The person who invests less emotionally holds more power in the relationship. The person who invests more emotionally becomes subordinate to the other's choices and moods. This isn't a conscious game that people play. It's an unconscious dynamic that emerges naturally based on levels of dependency, need, and investment, and it has profound effects on attraction, respect, and long-term relationship satisfaction. When she invests more emotionally than you do, when she thinks about you more, initiates contact more, changes her schedule for you more, and compromises her preferences for you more, she unconsciously places herself in a subordinate position. She becomes the one who accommodates, adapts, and adjusts to maintain the relationship. This investment doesn't make her more valuable to you. It makes you more valuable to her. It doesn't increase her power in the relationship. It decreases. It doesn't make her more attractive. It often makes her less attractive because it signals that she has greater need for the relationship, lower standards, and fewer options than you do. This dynamic explains why many relationships follow predictable patterns. In the beginning, investment levels are roughly equal. You're both making an effort, both interested, and both pursuing. But over time, one person usually begins investing more heavily than the other. Once this imbalance occurs, it tends to become self-reinforcing. The higher investment person becomes more anxious about losing the relationship, so they invest even more. They become more accommodating, more available, and more eager to please. The lower investment person becomes more comfortable with the arrangement, so they invest even less. They become more selective with their time and attention, more demanding of their preferences being met, and more confident that the other person will adapt to their needs. This creates what psychologists call the pursuer-distancer dynamic. The more one person pursues, the more the other person distances. The more one person invests, the less the other person values that investment. The more one person needs the relationship, the less the other person respects them. From a female psychology perspective, this dynamic often determines her level of respect and attraction. She might consciously want a man who adores her, but unconsciously she's more attracted to the man who seems slightly less invested than she is. She might logically prefer the man who always makes her his priority, but emotionally she craves the man who has other priorities that sometimes come before her. This isn't because women are inherently game-playing or manipulative. It's because attraction is often inversely correlated with availability and directly correlated with perceived value. The man who is always available seems less valuable than the man who is sometimes unavailable. The man who has no other options seems less desirable than the man who chooses her among other options. Understanding this dynamic doesn't mean being uncommitted, cold, or distant. It means maintaining your own life goals and interests even within a relationship. It means not making her your entire world, even if you love her deeply. It means investing in the relationship without over-investing to the point where the power balance becomes unhealthy. The most sustainable relationships involve relatively equal investment levels, where both people maintain their independence, their ability to walk away if necessary, and their options. This equality creates mutual respect rather than the pursuer-distancer dynamic that characterizes so many modern relationships. When she knows that you're with her by choice rather than need, that you value the relationship but don't depend on it for your happiness or identity, and that you're invested but not over-invested, she's more likely to maintain her attraction, her respect, and her healthy investment in the relationship. Use this knowledge wisely. The goal isn't to manipulate or control, but to understand and work harmoniously with the psychological forces that govern human attraction. When you do this successfully, you don't just get the woman, you get the best version of the woman, attracted to the best version of yourself.